Serge doing some palate calibration.
Dude, good old pineapple. Who doesn't like some pineapple?
It's true. I feel like when you brought it, it just I've been hating. Actually, I've been not enjoying my fruit experience. I don't know what it is, but I feel like coffees are most of the time sweeter than fruit is.
It's bold.
I mean out of season, that is.
Yeah. Like this last piece that I just munched on almost tasted green. I mean, I'd say it's an underdeveloped pineapple.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong.
Dude, after that rose defect kit cupping, man, God. I don't even want to use words anymore. It's so sad.
Shameful.
Oh, shame.
But yeah, let's brew some batchy. What do we have prepared today?
Good old Peru.
Nice.
Wilmer Cardozo.
Dude, I feel like I say this all the time on the podcast, but the batch at Makeworth just slaps so hard. I think Makeworth was, because of the batch tasting so good, just drip coffee.
Yeah. It's
changed how I view drip coffee, but it also has just made me realize how much it's lacking in most cafes. Like something that's like super dialed to the T.
Yeah, I agree. I think who was it? Juan Diaz confirmed my suspicion when I used to remember back in the day, even in Jacksonville, I was saying like, dude, the days of batch brewing, the days of automation, like automatic pour overs, which now I've changed my mind on automatic pour overs for sure. But the days of batch brew, I would always say like, dude, it's coming. It's like, it's getting there. But to be honest, it has stalled. I think one of the greatest moves towards excellent batch was ground control. And then since they won the award, like whatever device of the year at SEA in 2018, like batch brew stuff has kind of paused since then.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm still, like I was saying, I'm super passionate about batch brew. I think it deserves to be as good as a pour over. That's controversial, I know. But I think we can, we can get there.
And I've had some brews from, what Makeworth is doing, where I'm like, I've never had a pour over taste as good as this batch brew. Like I've tried, but I don't know what it is. It's like there's also a unique texture of brewing, a massive, 1 liter batch as opposed to a small brew. Like there's the way the coffee is extracting, I'm assuming is very differently than just the small dose.
Even the brew bed thickness is going to change extraction. I wouldn't go as far as saying like, man, batch brew is going to replace pour over. No. That's not, I don't think it's going to happen, because that single cup brew is so detailed, it's so nuanced that you get kind of you reveal more out of the coffee than you would on a batch brew.
Well, I'd also say I feel like the better the batch brews get, the more that it's like it's high accountability of a pour over.
Yes.
Like you have to have it dialed, or else, dude, let the batch brewers, slap, let it do its thing. And
I'll be honest, I think that's one of the reasons that Makeworth's sales on pour over isn't as high, is because when people compare, they're like, dude, this batch brew is like freaking insane.
I've done that.
So good. So,
Yeah. That being said, one thing I don't like about batch, like this, it stays hot for like ever.
Yeah. It's like still super hot.
Especially when I like to drink my coffee like pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm like,
it's brewed what?
Cool.
According to the Breville, it's been 11 minutes since we brewed. So, it's fairly fresh. It's pretty good. It's velvety. Acidity. Classic batch, not like a dialed one.
Not a dialed
for
batch.
sure.
Yeah, for sure. No.
But that's because we keep messing around with our settings. Dude, we're just like, every single time we brew, like, let's try this.
This is what I feel.
Try and change the flow rate.
I feel like every person that has like more than one coffee in their cupboard, like, is always, because you're always changing your grind size. And if you don't write it down,
Oh yeah.
then it's like, well, one day you're brewing an Indonesian coffee, the other day you're brewing an Ethiopia, a Peru, and then by the time you go back to the Indonesia, you have to change the grind setting, and then it's always off. So
Yeah.
I'm actually trying to force myself to drink just one coffee, or at least maybe start writing.
Yeah, I got that, that coffee filter right there. I wrote it on the coffee filter. It's their new logbook.
Why is that coffee filter have a pen in it? Well, Sergi's writing his coffee brewing notes in it.
Dude,
Who needs the coffee brewer
brew book?
logbook? Yeah. When you have a giant commercial filter that you can scribble on.
Plenty of space.
Yeah.
And it's circular. That does something to my brain.
All right, folks. Well, we're diving in this episode into roasting.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of times, like, people have approached us of being like, hey, like, we either want to pick your brains, or they've asked about starting a coffee business, a roasting company, or whatever. And sometimes people who are just getting into roasting have a lot of questions. I mean, I'll say this up front, like, it's sometimes the hardest thing about being a roaster is the lack of information out there. Like, sometimes it's hard because, like I said, I keep saying this, like, in the previous podcast, like, I feel like roasting sometimes is just you being thrown in the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, especially if you haven't like worked at a roasting company, or
Yes.
if you haven't worked or interned or sat in. Like, both you and I had that beginning before we launched into Mir, so that played a big role in it. But if you haven't, then like, what questions do you even ask? You know what I mean? What do you type in the Google search bar? Like, how do you stumble upon Mir? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so like all of those things are very, very important to starting and to basically just going and growing and being able to run a roasting company.
Yeah.
Or even roasting a batch, you know what I mean? Just a one batch without even selling it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And something that's like you're going to enjoy.
Right.
I mean, like, anybody can turn a coffee brown.
Yeah.
But can you get it brown in a way where it results in a cup that you actually enjoy? Is a completely different ballgame. I think before we go into some practical things, which we just wanted this episode to just be a wealth of information to people just starting out. Before we go into this, I just always want to preface this, like, go get a job at a roasting company if you can. If you can. Not everybody can. People have jobs, whether you're like an engineer or, something else, like, you're just intrigued by the process, that's fine. But if you want to do this as a business, as, maybe long-term, then you're going to need, like, we would highly recommend, go get a job, just train. And imagine that school that you're getting paid to do.
Yeah. Or just find a willing roaster who's willing to allow you to sit in on a roast or two.
Yeah, that's a big
observe. Like, I think observing is what will trigger those questions. Yeah. So once you observe enough, you can be like, oh, why does this happen? How does this happen? And all of the good stuff.
Which, that being said, you guys, if you guys would want us to just have a video, which we've talked about, just live streamed of our entire roast session, like, if that would be helpful, let us know. Like, if you're on YouTube, drop the comment below or find us on Instagram or whatever.
Dude, do we need to start a Patreon for a GoPro?
Oh, dude, that'd be fun, actually.
Yeah,
dude. That'd be fun.
Be super cool.
And somehow live stream it in a way where people can in like real time ask us questions.
Yeah.
Dude,
be like during the cool down, we can answer questions.
Yeah.
Dude, ideas on ideas. But yeah, what were we going?
Coffee roaster cool down sessions.
It's exclusive
live cool
Patreon, dude, Patreon only.
It's for like the squad, the roaster squad.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
We're a Coffee Roasters Guild.
Okay, folks. All right. So number one, what would you say is probably, when you were starting out, what is probably the first thing that you would recommend?
So I'm going to start with an assumption that you have access to a machine. You may not own it, but you have access to it.
Yeah.
So one of the first things would be just getting to know the machine itself, like the build of it, you know what I mean? The levers, the buttons, all of those little kind of nuanced things, even like how to clean the chaff, like stuff like that. Like how does the exhaust work? Where does the piping go? Like how did the drum work? Like all of those, like basically like stuff that no one really talks about when you're looking at a curve or looking at the measurements of a roast. Like no one's talking about like, dude, did you clean out the chaff? But those little things, understanding the whole function of the machine will help in the future and in the present and how you're, moving on to things.
You honestly don't know how important it is to clean the chaff until you have a chaff fire.
Yes.
We were roasting on the Loring as 75 pound batches, and somebody forgot to change the chaff out. Somebody went early, like on a roast day, and was like, I'll do it tomorrow. Dude, the chaff bin, it just all of a sudden you see the smoke crawling from outside the chaff, the bin, the pressure. God. And dude, you just don't mess around with that.
No.
You literally abort, stop everything. It was a very scary moment, but just a lot. I mean, it just results in just straight up like an hour of scrubbing that thing out because it's burnt, it's smoky, it's bad. Yeah. But I will say about that also is like, one of my biggest learning experiences was when I was cleaning out the Loring, which is this massive machine, and like doing a deep clean on it, knowing how to take out the cooling bin, and then being able to just see all those things work together just gives you a better idea instead of just saying, oh, this machine, you throw it in at the top and you pull the lever and it comes out and it does something inside.
Yeah.
It's kind of just a different approach. You're just gaining knowledge and you're saying, oh, this is how it works. This is how it functions. So that when you go on to maybe a more advanced level with more information, you can start connecting those things together in your mind. Or, when we were roasting on that old Diedrich, when that broke. And I've never roasted on a Diedrich, and I got the job. 2 weeks later, the fan breaks, and we literally had to figure out how to replace that thing. Yeah. With zero, that was a big learning experience.
That was actually neat. That's like, I think that set us up for success because now we own a Diedrich. So gave us a lot of knowledge. Plus our dad fixed that Diedrich. So now if our Diedrich breaks, we're going to be like, oh, Dad, remember how you did that? So I think that was a pretty good learning experience.
Yeah. Let alone like shout out to our dad. Yeah. Who literally was like, what's a roaster? It has a fan. Yeah, I know how to fix those. And literally just showed up. Like I still have a photo of him looking at the fan and literally goes and swaps out the fan. I'm like, how do you know these things? You've never seen a roaster in your life.
Yeah. Anyways. It's the dad thing. I'm not there yet.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah. But knowing your roaster is a big deal. And also not just your roaster. We talked about like a lot of the mechanical parts and how, the chaff and stuff, but really how it functions, how it interacts with beans and how it functions in the space that it's in, because a lot of those things will change, from your gas pressures being different than, somebody else's gas pressure. Are you in a climate controlled room or not climate controlled room? Like all those things will take time. Yeah. And so when we first got the Diedrich during our, where you have to season the roaster. Yeah. By roasting the coffee really dark was a great learning experience for us where we just, literally just took a lot of things,
just experimented.
Yeah. Just experimented. Exactly. Learn the roaster. Yeah.
And then learning, probes, like, learning where your probes are, understanding why they're there, and how they respond to software. So not only are you learning like the hardware part of roasting, you're also learning the data and the software part.
Yeah, 100%.
It's simply like for us, like it's Cropster. Like how does Cropster work? Like what does inventory look on Cropster? All of that. And maybe you're using Artisan. Like how does that work? Maybe you're using a timer. You know what I mean? How does that work? Like all of those things that you want to get comfortable with them so they're like a second nature. There's a big difference. Honestly, like you roast most of our coffee more than I roast. And there's a very big, we follow the same roast profile. We follow the same roast profile. It's like, the curve, that all the numbers, all the data, it's the same. But the way you do it is so much smoother than me because you're just more familiar with simply sitting down at the desk, having the one hand on the computer and the other hand on the levers, it's easier because you're familiar with that.
Sure.
And I think that actually improves your roast. Yeah. There's less possibility of a mistake.
Yeah. And most of those things, like, you'd, you know, a lot of those things you do just have to plug the roaster in and plug and play.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's a process. But that being said, a lot of those things that we mentioned are just stuff that you don't even have to even sit behind a roaster to learn.
Yeah.
You can literally just look into it. You can literally clean somebody's chaff without even roasting on the thing, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So, but before we get carried away, the second thing we would say is, as a starting off roaster, cup everything.
Mm-hmm.
Cup. Literally taste everything. You go to the grocery store, you literally buy some pineapple and literally taste fruit, taste nuts, taste chocolate. And then cup other roasting companies that you like, cup their coffee. Like sometimes we'll buy coffee from roasters we like and throw it on the cupping table next to our coffees and just be like, okay, what are the, you know, compare and contrast.
Yeah. And connect with other roasters and just cup their coffee, let them cup whatever you're like. Maybe you're not roasting yet, but still, like, connect with those people. Like, I know for us, we've cupped Grant's coffee from Bold Bean. He sent it our way. We've had some friends that you just connected with that sent some more coffees to just cup and try and share knowledge. You know what I mean? It's really hard to maybe cup alone, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with the process of cupping, the easier it will be in the long run when you do have to cup with, maybe not in huge groups, but you know what I mean, bigger groups where you have to talk about it.
Yeah. Cupping with people is huge. It's like just like a great experience. And because we're in such a sensory industry, knowing how to taste and what you're tasting and putting words to it is absolutely essential. Like, it's hard to be a roaster and roast good coffee when you don't really know what you're aiming for or what you're tasting or how to articulate and communicate that to other people. And so that's a huge thing. And not just, you know, right now, maybe you're just planning to start a roasting company, go buy somebody else's coffee and cup it, taste it, you know. But also learning how to roast a coffee, cup it, and know how to put flavors and nuances to the data that you're getting from your roast. Being able to say, oh man, I almost hit second crack. This is what almost hitting second crack tastes like. What happens when you drop the coffee right at first crack? What does that taste like? You know, and putting a flavor in your mouth, in your mind, and correlating that to stuff you see on the curve. Because at the end of the day, that's what's really going to help you tailor your roast to what you want to get.
Yeah. And that's like basically adding sensory language to a graph, to numbers, to data, because the data without the experience is not worth anything. Whether you have a perfectly declining ROR or you extended your Maillard reaction, you know, it means nothing if you can't say, oh, it tastes like this because I did this. And that takes experience. I think for me, that's been like one of the hardest things, is especially as we're dialing in coffee, to look at a graph and be like, okay, we kept everything the same here, but we changed this. Is this what, you know, how this coffee tastes when it was like affected this way? So it does take practice, but that's what makes you a better roaster. And that's what makes you understand even the essences of what do you like? You know what I mean? Like maybe, I don't know, this might be controversial. Like maybe you don't like coffees that have a perfectly declining ROR. Like, you know what I mean? Like you don't, or you like coffees into second crack. Like, or you like coffees dropped at crack. Like you were saying, like you got to learn those things, and you can only learn those things by experience, because no one can tell you what you like.
100%.
So I know I'm going off like on a long stretch here, but I would say like cupping just helps you understand like those like nuances personally and add language and build language around that so you can understand yourself and what you want to do.
100%. I agree. Third and last practical thing that we'd like to say is, you know, when you're roasting and you're changing things on the fly, things can get scary, anxious, and it's, you know, something Mark Michelson said, amateur roasters are constantly reacting to things.
Yeah.
No, the only thing that needs to be reacting is your beans in the roaster.
Yeah.
You're not the one that needs to be reacting. What you should do is learn how to respond to coffee. Learn how to respond to what you're seeing, the data points on the graph. And a lot of that has to do with having a plan.
Yep.
There's a lot of times where I'm like, Serge, dude, should I turn down the gas? You're like, no, stick to the plan. I'm like, no, the ROR is like going haywire. Yeah. No, do we change it? No, stick to the plan. And that gives you some rootedness. And when you can learn to roast according to a plan, it actually gives you the confidence to be able to make that necessary change if you need to.
If you need to, yeah. Because if you've cupped coffees long enough, like we were saying earlier, then you sit down and you can actually like say with confidence, like, man, I want this coffee. I want to highlight these attributes of the coffee. Therefore, I'm going to do this in the roast. Therefore, like I want to start at this peak at the ROR, like I want to start at this temperature. Yeah. I want to have this batch. You can make a plan because you have a vision and you have an idea of what it could possibly taste like. Yeah. For sure. Without just, tossing I don't know, measuring out 12 pounds, turning on the heat to 400 and just tossing it, giving it a whirl. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and sometimes things go different in a roast. Like we've had that where it's like you do everything the same and then somehow it's reacting different. Well, having a really good solid plan is actually also going to set you up to be able to respond to those changes and make the right changes so that you can minimize the differences in the end result. So something might have went different in your curve. Well, you know how to bring it back,
right?
So that at the end of the day, it could still be a really great coffee that you're roasting.
It may even help you like find new variables that you weren't aware of before. Because if all of the variables that you were aware of, you made a plan for, and something went haywire, you can say, well, I did everything like that I planned to do. So what caused that? And you may discover we even discovered stuff like, the ambient temperature of the room quite possibly changed. The humidity in the room changed that. So we have to track those changes and be able to predict if we're roasting at a much cooler day and the room isn't warm enough, we have to make changes. We have to turn on the heater maybe for a little longer, or we have to turn off the heater and open the doors or make some ventilation. Those things you won't be able to find out or track if you haven't had a plan for the other things.
100%. Yeah, I think that's that's good. And by plan, if you're confused, we mean write down your charge temp, how much coffee is going in. Are you, if you're, making gas changes according to a temperature or a specific time you want to make a gas change, write those things down on a piece of paper. Literally just have them right next to the roaster so you can just peek, 5 minutes is coming up, I need to make a change, and what that change is going to be.
Or even I want to make sure that I drop the coffee at this temperature, or I want to get to second crack, different places and times in the roast, because you're already thinking ahead, I want this coffee to be darker so it's easier to extract on espresso, or I want this coffee to be, light and floral, and I want to highlight the acidity for filter. Those things, if you come with that plan, then you can adjust your roast profile or curve to that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool. As we're kind of coming to an end, man, this conversation was just so good and time is flying by. But as we come to an end, give us a couple of resources that you can direct people to that, other than, this podcast that we'll be touching up on different topics. Where can they go for more resources or information?
I think one of the first things I invested in is I bought Scott Rayo's book. It's the older one. He just released a newer one. What was it? Roaster's Companion?
Roaster's Best Practices.
Yeah, Best Practices is the new one. Yeah. Or the old one was
Roaster's Companion.
Yeah. So I got that, and that was recommended to me by the roaster I was just sitting under.
We should pick that one up, actually.
The new one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second thing I would say is like scour YouTube and Instagram. People follow, companies like Cropster, Roast Magazine. Follow, Rob Hoos, Ann Cooper, Scott Ray on Instagram. Sometimes they host like these live sessions, live webinars with, whether that's Loring and Rob or Ikawa, whatever. There's some free nuggets out there that if you're following those people in the industry that you're in the loop, you're like, oh, okay, I need to tune into this, you know? So, and last but not least, if you really want to go all out, you can do paid consultancy. So I know, for example, Mark Michelson just started his consultancy business where he consults with roasters and helps them and all that jazz. There's also Scott Rayo has some of that going on.
Yeah.
Who else?
There's Ann Cooper has her mastermind group. Highly recommend that as well. Rob Hoos has classes on how to roast the Ikawa. So that's another one. Yeah.
So there's that's like if you really want to invest, put your money into there, which I think is a very good idea if you really want to do this as a business, and you have the money. So that being said, I think that's it. Yeah. There's so much more that we could cover, but thank you guys so much for listening. Leave a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. Throw some stars in there. Put some comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section. Find us on Instagram. Really, don't be afraid to reach out if you have a question. We're always more than happy to initiate and have a good conversation.
That's right.
All right, folks. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.